1, 2, 3, 4.
I love all my friends. I love all my friends. I'm parking the car, turning off the lights.
Hello, you're listening to the Skylight Books podcast series. We are a general interest independent bookstore located in the Los Feliz neighborhood of Los Angeles, California. This year, because of the coronavirus pandemic, we've had to close our store and cancel in-person events. But Skylight is your neighborhood bookstore, and we are finding ways to create community even while we're far apart. In the coming weeks, we'll be putting out lots of new audio content to help you discover new books, connect with authors, and check in with your favorite booksellers. To learn more about how you can help keep Skylight alive, please visit our website at skylightbooks.com or check out our social media accounts on Twitter and Instagram. You can subscribe to the podcast on Podbean, iTunes, and Spotify. Thank you for listening and enjoy.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Handsell podcast. How you guys doing?
Doing great.
Doing pretty well. Hey, Mick.
Great's an overstatement.
This is the podcast producer of the Skylight Books podcast series, Mick Kowaleski, and I'm here again with my co-host,
Maddie Gobbo, events manager.
and we are both joined by
Sydney Lopez, bookseller.
Hey, Sydney. So we got a pretty good episode for you guys today. We've got another little book recommendation from bookseller Andie. And then Sydney, we've got a pretty great conversation between you and our other friend / bookseller, Ben Olcott.
Yeah. We were supposed to record about a 15-20 minute conversation on how we got into bookselling, books that were, really formative for us. But we ended up in typical bookseller fashion talking for about an hour and a half about various bookstores we worked in and just books that we love. And it was really, really fun. And I'm sure you have edited it into something that's listenable. So thank you. I hope you guys enjoy it.
Too much out. I think it'll be completely. It's a really a joy. It made me miss you guys so much because I'm still quarantined. Haven't seen you guys in person in too long. So it gave me feels, man.
We're just a couple of chatty Cathys that like books. So
and that's really what like the behind the counter vibe is.
Totally.
Skylight.
Totally.
So hopefully we'll give you guys a little taste of that. Let's see. And then Maddie, you had a fun little segment planned for us to open up the podcast with.
Oh, yeah. So I saw on Twitter someone asking booksellers to recommend books that could be read to the soundtrack of Fiona Apple's masterpiece, Fetch the Bolt Cutters. And I went straight to Sydney to ask this question because she's a huge Fiona Apple stan.
Yes. The day that Fiona Apple's album was released, I got texts from a series of friends in rapid succession that just said "New Fiona" in all caps with exclamation points, and I never felt better understood by friends or other people. So yeah, I mean, with great ambition, I'm going to try my best to find a book that corresponds with each song, which might be too much. If not, maybe just books that correspond thematically and in feeling. But if you haven't listened to Fetch the Bolt Cutters yet, do yourself a favor. Pour yourself your favorite beverage, sit in a comfy spot, and just let it wash over you,
Bookseller
so
approved.
Bookseller, really? Is there a more bookseller approved artist than Fiona Apple? Honestly?
Probably not. I mean,
maybe the Cocteau Twins.
Oh God.
Every bookstore I've ever been in is always playing the Cocteau Twins.
Yeah, I don't know what it is about those guys. I mean, it's just very pleasant. I mean, cherry colored funk. Who doesn't want that? You know?
That sounds so great right now.
Yeah, Fiona Apple wrote Criminal in an hour when she was 17. So she wanted to release her first album, and they were like, we need a hit. And she was like, all right, you want a hit? She like went to a room, wrote Criminal in an hour, and was like, here's your hit. So
That's boss.
A
yeah.
legend.
Yeah, like truly a legend from the time she was a wee babe.
I wonder if we
And-
could brainstorm right now, like who are the most Fiona Apple-esque writers off the top of your head?
Off the top of my head, let's see.
I was
Carmen Maria
thinking,
Machado.
yes, Carmen Maria Machado for sure.
Yeah, Maddie, you had a
Yeah.
good one in our little preamble today.
Yeah, my thought was Joy Williams. First of all, because Fiona Apple and Joy Williams both love dogs.
Oh, yeah.
And Joy Williams also has a very strong anti-establishment mood in most of her
Yeah.
writing. Her book Breaking and Entering, I think,
Uh-huh.
is the most fetch the bolt cutters like
Literally.
book, because it's literally about people breaking into rich people's houses.
Oh, I love that.
It's fantastic. Highly recommend. Also has a great dog in it.
Yeah. You know, this is kind of corny, but de Beauvoir, I'm literally looking at the book on my shelf right now called The Woman Destroyed, and I love that book. And very much similar vibe. So
Nice.
Here's the question. Is there like a book or an album? Is there a book you can't read without thinking of an album, a specific album? Or vice versa?
I can't read The Marriage Plot by Jeffrey Eugenides without thinking of the Talking Heads.
the white ennui.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the white ennui that is like delicious. I've read that book so many times because I was like, it's so great to be in love with unavailable men, isn't it? And then I like read that book and like thought of the Talking Heads at the same time. Very important, like 21 to 23-year-old stage of my life. But yeah, those two are like super closely linked in my head.
Yeah, that's a good one. For me, when Kendrick Lamar's To Pimp a Butterfly came out, I was in the middle of reading The Bluest Eye by Toni Morrison.
Oh shit.
And like on the subway in DC, and like I cannot listen to that album, that masterpiece, like greatest albums of all time, To Pimp a Butterfly, without thinking of Toni Morrison, or see Toni Morrison's name without thinking of Kendrick Lamar. I think they're
Interesting.
yeah.
I feel like that works.
Yeah, like yeah, in all aspects, sort of like the jazzy vibe of To Pimp a Butterfly, plus
Yeah.
obvious thematic links. So, yeah.
What about you, Maddie?
This is a hard question. I guess what has popped into my head while you guys were talking is Thomas Bernhard. I'm not going to pick a book, but his general vibe, I think, pairs quite well with The Silver Jews. Just because they're misanthropes. They're incredibly funny, but also so dark, pitch black humor. And there's a definite sort of horror of crowds in both of their work. I've been listening to a lot of Silver Jews lately. Dave Berman passed away earlier this
R.I.P.
year or late last year. He's just an incredible lyricist and poet, and his work deserves more attention, much like Thomas Bernhard's.
Yes.
I'm
Yeah.
really
that's a good one.
gonna put myself on blast here. I'm not familiar with either of those. I know. Stop.
Well, now you have
He's got
something you can
another
look up.
band too, right? What was his other project besides the Silver Jews?
Oh, Pink Mountain Tops?
Yes.
Something like that?
Both so good. Both so
Very good. Very good.
So we want to get to the actual content of the episode. This is the problem with being a bookseller, is that you just get so caught up talking to each other about this stuff.
We love to chat.
Yeah, so we're definitely going to throw it to Andie, and then we'll revisit. You'll hear Sydney's dulcet tones later on in the episode for our main event. But before we get to that, what have you guys been reading?
Let's see. I have been reading a short story collection by Ha Seong-nan called Bluebeard's First Wife.
Oh my god.
It is weird as hell. Very surreal, sort of domestic fictions.
Love it.
Perfect bedtime reading to give yourself weird dreams. It's
Oh,
coming
yeah.
out from Open Letter Press, who do fantastic translated work. And it has a blurb from Brian Evanson, my boo, my favorite, the master of horror and strangeness. It's good. It's good stuff.
So if you think your dreams are too boring, check out Bluebeard's First Wife. Is what you're saying.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Sid, what about you?
I am reading Norma Jean Baker of Troy, the new Anne Carson, because I don't think I've ever loved anyone as much as I love Anne Carson. The first book I ever read by her was Autobiography of Red, and I have read it so many times and have like a bunch of really like emo notations and underlines, and my copy is just destroyed. And so when I saw this, her new story, and it's the stories of Marilyn Monroe and Helen of Troy. It's just like her she's a professor of classics. She translates stuff from ancient Greek. So she's obviously a genius. And then she has this capacity to tie in, like more contemporary culture. And it's just beautiful. I mean, she tugs my heartstrings every time.
I think Anne Carson has some Fiona Apple connections too.
Oh yeah. Totally. Ow, sorry, my cat just attacked me.
Oh no.
I'm so sorry.
I might cut that out. I might not.
Maybe that's the signal that it's time for us to stop.
Yeah, she just lunged at my elbow. But Anne Carson, amazing. She's a Cancer. She's great at feelings. So yeah, that's what I'm reading.
Mick, what about you?
I've been reading the Japan and India journals of Joanne Kiger. She was a beat movement contemporary of the Kerouacs and the Ginsbergs, who Ginsberg she did not like at all. This is the best part about the book, I think, is her just going on. She spent like 2 weeks with Allen Ginsberg in India, I believe, and just found him to be the most exhausting person of all
Seems
time.
like it.
It's definitely the most drama, but also it's just like she was a really good poet, and I think has some really interesting insights about Zen Buddhism. And there's this great passage where she journals about a piece of dialogue she had with a male contemporary who said, "Don't you want to learn Zen and lose your ego?" To which she replied, "After all of this struggle to attain one." I can't recommend her enough. She's great.
That's awesome.
So let's get to it. Thank you guys for joining me. Sid, we'll see you a little later.
Yeah, just fast forward or don't. Over me, whatever you want.
All right. I'll talk to you guys later. And for all you listeners, enjoy the show.
Hi there, my name is Andie, and I'll be talking to you about my most recent staff pick, the exhibition of Persephone Q. Percy's at the edge of something, perhaps her relationship with her own womanhood, or the choices, or maybe lack thereof, that have led her to such a contained life. But now more than ever she is grappling with her identity. Told in sparse poetic prose, this novel examines self-perception versus outward perceptions, gender roles and technology in a way that leaves you haunted, wondering if what you see in yourself is really seen by others. I think this book really has an interesting take on gender and plays a lot with this idea of women being likable or not. And I think that's especially important right now in our political climate. Thank you.
I don't want to be helped. I want to suffer.
Why don't you go in your living room where there's air conditioning?
Because it's the neighborhood that's loud. I have there are just people yelling all the time. Literally that. It literally is something like that.
Just screaming?
Yeah. All right, so I hit record, so we're ready whenever.
Look at this bread I baked.
Ew, is that the sourdough?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so your starter got fixed.
Yeah, she's
Your
working.
starter has started.
Okay, so do I have to introduce it as like, this is the Handsell, blah, blah, blah?
I don't know, but maybe you should just say it again. I don't know.
Hi, listeners. This is a Skylight Books podcast called The Handsell. My name is Sydney. I'm a bookseller with Skylight Books, and I'm talking today with Ben, another bookseller at Skylight Books. Say hi to everyone, Ben.
Hi, everybody. Hey, Sydney.
Hey, how's it going?
I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm chilling.
Yeah.
Drinking some Bordeaux in my
Lovely.
apartment, ready
Lovely.
to talk about books with one of my favorite booksellers.
Aw, likewise. I've taken many of your recommendations for books for book club, for the Coyotes book club, which I run at the store.
Some of them have been more successful than others.
I think it's a good hit rate, but there's one notable exception we won't
We
mention.
won't go there.
Yeah,
I like
there was some debate within the group.
but some other notable hits like House of Mirth by Edith
yeah.
Wharton.
Yeah.
Loved it.
That was a great one. That was a great suggestion. I'd never read it. I had only read, I think like in high school there's some Edith Wharton book that everybody reads, right?
Ethan Frome,
right. Everybody reads
Yeah.
Ethan Frome, but
Yeah.
House of Mirth is the one, and there's another book that I can't think of off the top of my head.
Age
right
of
now.
Innocence.
Here you go.
Yeah,
I'm
I'm a big Wharton
that's
head.
a Wharton head. That's some A+ book selling right there.
All
But
right.
yeah, it was a great success. So
Yeah, I'm glad.
Yeah.
You guys should all check out Coyotes. I think you guys are doing virtual meetings, correct?
yeah, we are still doing virtual meetings. Last month we did Flights by Olga Tokarczuk. This month we are doing The Overstory by Richard Powers, and
Oh.
next month we are going to do The Lathe of Heaven by Ursula Le Guin.
That book is so good.
Yeah,
Oh my
yeah.
goodness.
Yeah, I'm really excited to talk about that one. I recently just started reading Ursula Le Guin. I think because of your recommendation. I think you recommended it.
Yeah.
And she's genius. So it's really looking forward to that.
She's incredible. I'm really surprised they haven't made Lathe of Heaven into a movie yet. It's so
Yeah.
adaptable. And it's very relevant to the ongoing conversation around technology and
It's like a Christopher Nolan movie, just like on a platter.
I know, right? Like,
Yeah.
come on, Chris, my
Yeah.
guy.
Come on. Just do it.
All right, let's get to it. So
All right.
we are just going to chat about some general book selling, I don't really have the word for it, but we're just, this is your look into the mind and life of a bookseller in an independent bookstore
Yeah.
in Los Angeles.
Uh-huh.
So, Ben, I want you to tell me what your first book selling job was.
Okay. I'll go first and then you go. Because you've been an LA person with all your bookstore jobs, I believe, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Cool. So I got my first book selling job in New York, where I was living right out of college. And I was sort of like going headfirst into literary things. I was like, I'm a writer, I'm living in New York. I was like working for Oxford University Press, but not in the fun and cool trade side. I was working in textbooks, college textbooks, which was, literary-ish. But I was sort of like, I was also trying to write some reviews on the side, and I'd gotten some things published at this like magazine called KGB Bar, Lit magazine, which is just a like digital version or digital site for this like very famous bar, like literary bar. But anyway, the editor of that magazine just gave me a job listing like out of nowhere and was like, this bookstore is looking for a manager. I was 23 years old and I didn't know a damn thing about managing anything, but I was like gung-ho. I was like, let's do this. I'm going to do it. Like, I'm going to be the manager of this book club. I like saw my whole future in front of me. And for some reason, like when I was like, yes, I'll do it, the person connected me to an email, Paula Cooper at paulacoopergallery.com. Now, Paula Cooper is like one of the most high-powered art gallerists in New York City. Like, absolutely incredibly famous from like the 60s and 70s. I did not know this going in. I had no clue. And I don't know much about art, period. But so I decide to, I'm just kind of like, okay, let's go. I'll talk to Paula Cooper about this, whatever. I don't even know her affiliation with this bookstore. So I get there, and it's like, I get to the gallery, and it's like, there's this huge, like, Christian Marclay, like it's in this room that's probably 40 feet by 40 feet, this like cube. It's like so intimidating. There's like all these like incredibly erudite and articulate and smart looking New Yorkers like around this gallery. And I go up to Paula Cooper's office, and she's like 70 years old, like beautiful, like such a presence. And I'm like, I try to convince this woman that I should be the manager of her bookstore because it turns out it's her bookstore. She owns the frickin' bookstore. It's across the street from her gallery.
Oh my gosh.
So she takes one look at my resume, which is like 6 months at Oxford University Press. And she's like, you have absolutely no qualifications for this job. She literally looks at me in the face and says, you're not qualified.
Oh,
and then she was like, well, let's go down to the bookstore. And eventually I convinced her to just like give me a day at the bookstore. Because I just really wanted to work at a bookstore.
So you managed to finesse Paula Cooper into giving you a job?
I think she was more of like a sympathy thing. She was like, this idiot comes in like, saying, I'm ready to be your manager. Like I had like this whole thing. Like my skills from Oxford University Press are transferable. No, but that's how I got my first job. I snuck in.
I really appreciate the confidence with which you went into that situation.
More like ignorance. I really had no clue who or what I was doing. But that was a great job.
That's what I'll say.
That's right. That's right. And I stumbled into just this really, really cool little bookstore in Chelsea. It was a great experience.
What's it called again?
It's called 192 Books.
192 Books. Okay.
Yeah.
Not familiar with it, but I will have to.
Yeah. It's really tiny. It's not one of the big ones, but cool. It was awesome. It was great. All right, your turn. Let's hear about you.
I first worked at Vroman's bookstore in Pasadena, which I think is the largest and oldest independent bookstore in Southern California. They've been around since like 1890 something. I don't remember exactly when.
Wow.
And I used to go there a lot in high school because I'm a native Angelino, Eagle Rock. Before there were artisanal cheese shops in Eagle Rock. So as a 16-year-old, my best friend and I, we would go see movies at the Lemley.
Nice.
And then we would go to Vroman's afterwards and just read. So at 16, we were like, dude, we could totally work here. Let's just put in some apps and, we're totally qualified, similar to you,
Sure.
except being 16. And also having no professional experience whatsoever, like being completely, like not at all qualified.
Yeah.
And then fast forward about 7 years, after a year or two after I graduated from college, I applied to Vroman's again as a seasonal worker for the Christmas season.
Right.
And if you worked retail at all in any capacity, not just in a bookstore, it's absolutely bananas.
Yeah, that's the crazy time.
So yeah, it was kind of like, out of the frying pan into the fire, whatever the saying is.
Yeah, something like that.
So yeah, I started working there, and then eventually I was brought on as just like a regular bookseller, not seasonal. And yeah, that's how I got my start. I was there for like a little over a year.
Cool. So when you were doing that seasonal stuff, was that like hand selling books on the floor, or was that working in like the back or something? Like what was that job like?
It was being a bookseller out the gate.
Oh, okay.
Like doing the hand selling. And because it was Christmas, that was actually like pretty important, because Vroman's, unlike Skylight and some other bookstores, actually has departments within the store.
Right.
So if you're actually in the books department itself, then that's your job, is you are a bookseller. Whereas you can be in other departments, you can do sidelines or cash register, or they have like a really big pen department. So I was actually a bookseller, and yeah, it's interesting because you always think that if you love to read or if you're a big fan of books, that's automatically going to translate into, oh, of course I could sell books.
Yeah.
But there's a pretty steep learning curve when it comes
Absolutely.
to you have to acquaint yourself with everything that's new
Yeah.
as fast as you can. You kind of have to develop this like vocabulary for assessing like different people's wants and needs, and like familiarize yourself with a lot of different books, because I mean you have to be able to sell books that you've never read,
For sure.
and you have to be able to think of a book even if you haven't read it and be like, I think this will work for you. And some people might see it as disingenuous. I don't particularly see it that way. I think of it as just like, the more that you can do that, the more that you can ask someone books that they've read. And
yeah, I don't see it as disingenuous either, though. I mean, I guess it could be seen that way, but I feel like it's like it's not that you don't engage with the books at all as a bookseller, like even the ones that you've never read, like you just engage with them in a slightly different way. Like it's not like you don't know the story of like the authors or the book or the publication or what, like that's all information, but you just have to find a shorthand for, kind of giving it to people or telling its story to people. Because people want their books. It doesn't have to exactly, coincide with the exact books you read. That would make you a bad bookseller if that was the only thing you could talk about.
Yeah. Did you note, I mean, this might be a sort of silly question, but was there anything that sort of stood out to you immediately in selling books on the East Coast and West Coast, like New York versus LA,
the difference?
Yeah, like was there anything noticeable? Were there like pretty stark differences in taste, or was it pretty across the board? Like Skylight was similar to 192.
They were kind of similar. I mean, the one thing about 192 Books is it was like, I mean, when I say it was a tiny store, it was probably the size of a large bedroom, maybe not even that large. So it was just crammed with books, and a lot of it was art books. So obviously, because as I was saying, Paula Cooper was the owner, and she's, this big art person. So, I mean, art books take up a lot of space. So that it was like we had art books on one wall, and then the rest of it was just like as much literature as you could stuff into this place. So it was fairly specialized. I will say there was not much like general readership kind of stuff. I will say that the people who came in were almost always looking. Maybe the one difference is people who came into 192 Books pretty much already knew what they were looking for, and it was more just a matter of asking whether we had it.
I see.
I rarely brought people around and was like, maybe the only time would be around holiday time when somebody's just like, give me a good gift idea. Like, here are 5 traits of somebody that wants a book or who I want to give a book to, like, go ahead. But a lot of people came in and like, didn't really want to get talked to that much. Like they went straight to their section, and like, maybe you had some rapport at the front. I think in LA, there's definitely more chat as part of the process, I think.
Yeah.
Though I don't want to overstate that. Like it's certainly not always the case.
Yeah.
But I find that people are more often saying, well, I don't really know what I'm looking for. Skylight, again, is also a more general bookstore.
Yeah.
For sure. Like they're kind of different.
I see.
Yeah. What have your observations been over the years?
Let's see. Skylight definitely caters to a different demographic than Pasadena does. Broman's in Pasadena. I mean, there's definitely a lot of overlap in terms of being like, more general readership bookstores that have a lot for everyone. But I mean, I think Skylight, being sort of in the nexus of like Los Feliz and Hollywood and Silver Lake, there's, there are things we have that like sort of cater more to people that are interested in performing arts or acting or art,
Yeah.
Stuff like that. And we have less of, I'm not sure exactly what I'm getting at, but
well, there's the whole arts annex, for example.
Yeah.
We have a whole store dedicated to just fine arts. That's people are in there all the time who are super knowledgeable of what they're asking for.
Yeah, it's intimidating. There's often customers that know so much more than I do in the arts annex. I mean, we have some really incredible booksellers that like know the arts annex like the back of their hand. Like our magazine buyer, he's amazing. But yeah, I mean, I guess having never worked at a bookstore in another city, I don't have like too much to offer in terms of like pretty stark differences that I've noticed. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely my favorite part of being a bookseller is someone either like my two favorite things are either someone that you recommend a book to and they're really excited about it, or someone that presents a really good challenge to you. And it sort of is like you unite the whole front. Like you go around and ask all the different booksellers, like, I have someone, the last thing they read was like, I don't know, like Clarice Lispector, and they're looking for short stories with like X, Y, and Z elements. And like you all put your heads together and you're like, I'm going to find the perfect book for this person.
And you come up with Lucia Berlin.
Yeah. And I mean, perfect. But there's like, for me, it's like definitely the highlight of being a bookseller is, something that like someone wanting to read something that I'm excited about.
Totally.
Is like the highlight of being a bookseller for me.
Or just getting something exactly right. Like if somebody just like, they're like, they kind of don't know what they're looking for. They give you 3 other suggestions, as you were saying. And then you give them a thing that you're kind of like, maybe this is right. And they read like the back cover and they're just like, yep, like that's exactly what I wanted. Like this is perfect.
There's people that come in and they're like looking for books and sometimes I go a little overboard and I'll hand them a stack of like 4 or 5 books. And then I like see them go to the register with all of them and I'm like, oh my goodness. Like,
yes.
I did my job.
I went 4 for 4. Yes.
Yeah, no, it's super exciting.
Yeah, it is.
I actually had a woman email me. She came in, was looking for some books, and she was one of those customers. She bought like 4 or 5 books that I recommended. One of them was, I think it was like A Visit from the Goon Squad by Jennifer Egan, The Pisces by Melissa Broder. She was looking for like good, engaging, sort of like vacation-y reads, but also just like solid books. And there are a couple other ones. I don't remember what they were. And then she came back and she was like, I loved all of your books. And then I gave her another round. And then about like 6 months later, she emailed me and was like, I moved to New York, but I appreciated your book recommendations so much when I was in LA. Like, what are you reading now? Do you have any recommendations? And that was like,
oh, that's great.
I think like my single like crowning achievement as a bookseller was just like this amazing woman that like I had developed this rapport with, like, only through the bookstore emailing me to ask me my opinion about books. I was like, I've made it. This is it. This is my
That's the Holy Grail. That's the Holy Grail. I feel like every bookseller's dream is to be like a personal bookseller to somebody who really loves books.
Yeah.
Like almost like a personal chef, like a book buyer for somebody who has like a bazillion dollars.
Yeah, that'd
be nice.
What a dream. I feel like
that's a dream job.
Yeah. I feel like I still have a lot to learn before I could do that, but I mean, definitely ranks top 5 of dream jobs.
Yeah, this isn't a master class though. Though maybe we should start recording those.
So that's how you got into bookselling, was 192. What are like some of the most formative books that you read, and did they get you into bookselling, or did you discover them after you became a bookseller, or both?
So I feel like this is interesting because it's like formative at what time? Like as a formative as a reader, Those are like, for me, they're like hopelessly boyish, but they're like books like Dune and like Lord of the Rings and like His Dark Materials. Like I obsessively read these books, like, at a pretty young age. And I just like went as far as I could. And there actually are like a ton of sequels to a lot of these things. They're not like as good as the originals, but if you want to go deep into the world, there's usually a lot of world to get into.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of like what's
like extensive world building is what I'm gathering.
Yeah. So like people for Dune, for example, like people read book 1 of Dune. I believe there are 7 more books in like the main line of Dune. And then there are 6.
Long?
Yeah, they're all as long. Some are longer. And then there are like 6 other books that like tell about the whole like history of the world. And I read every single one.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So I just fell head over heels with some of these things. And like, Lord of the Rings, read the Silmarillion, like all the other stories, like, I was just obsessed. Yeah. And then I think later I mostly fell in love with modernists like Joyce, Woolf, Hemingway, not an uncommon segue, but it was really, to me, I got into book selling it's hard to say if one title was so formative, but I definitely got into book selling because I knew I wanted to be like immersed in contemporary books. Mm-hmm. Like I knew I needed to know more because I really wanted to be a writer. And I was just like, my education is like a little bit behind here. And I mean, I can't say there's one title, but I can say that it was a moment when I just decided I wanted to be completely immersed in this literature thing. And I was just like, well, you got to work at a bookstore then. There's no way around it.
Yeah.
But it was also around the time when I was like, even though I felt I was behind, I knew I was reading like enough to sort of know what I was talking about for the first time. But that wasn't for years. I did not have your gall. I was at 16 years old. I was like, I was like reading His Dark Materials for the 4th time. I wasn't about to go apply for a job at, some bookstore.
Yeah, no, I never quite got into a lot of those sort of really classic fantasy and science fiction. It's only more recently, that I've started reading like Octavia Butler and Ursula Le Guin. I've never read Dune. I have a copy of it that I've been to. I've tried so many times to read The Fellowship of the Rings, and I get to the part where they're in the forest, and I'm like, how long are they going to be in this forest?
Look, a note
for my boy.
I know, a note for Tolkien. Like, look, you got to get out of the first act a little bit faster. All right, we've been in the Shire for a while. Like,
yeah. I mean, it's extremely charming. They stop. What is it? The Prancing Pony that they stop at?
Prancing Pony, yeah.
And they're like gossiping, and like Bilbo is like very bizarre, and
it's great.
I mean, there's so much of it that I really enjoy. I just I have never quite had the patience to make it around like that first bend. Even though I find it so charming, it's weird. But what do you think is one of the first books that you read that you were like, I want to write something like this?
Oh, I know exactly what it is. It was a eureka moment for me in my life. It was like I like started college and I was a pre-med major for my first year and a half.
No way.
I was. And I was garbage at it. I was no good. I had like, straight B- in Gen Chem. And like, I even went into organic chemistry. And it was just like, the way that goes is like, you're not going to get into a good enough med school with those grades. So you might as well quit, which is honestly, it was the right call. But then I decided I wanted to like really, for some reason, I mean, my parents are very literary and I had always done well in the humanities. And for some reason, I just decided I wanted to take an English course. Mm-hmm. And so this was leading into my second semester of my sophomore year. So during that winter break, I picked up, and this is good. I want to be honest about this, though it's going to be, I picked up Infinite Jest. And look, look, I'm not gonna lie. I picked it up and I just look. Say what you want about a lot of his character, and there's a lot to be said that's not excellent. And of course, like the cult's following behind him is ridiculous, and all of the weird toxic masculinities that come with it are not great. But when I first picked up that book, it was talking about a lot of things that resonated with me, you know, playing sports and depression and like substances and all of this stuff. And I just hadn't seen it before. I had never seen anything like that. And it was like, to me, it just opened a part of me. I just remember thinking, I want to try that. Whatever he just did to my brain, I want to know if I can do that.
Yeah.
And then I've literally ever since then I pursued it. Didn't finish Infinite Jest, by the way. I got 200 pages in and I was like, all right, I have a life to live now, but.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes I sort of am disappointed that certain authors are reduced to like their following, you know, because I mean, David Foster Wallace is, you know, certainly with his past of like domestic violence and
exactly, it's not
things like that is super problematic. And that's a much larger conversation in terms of, do we discount the art of all artists that have behaved less than admirably? But I find that, you know, like liking certain authors becomes a shorthand for like what kind of a person you are or what you're into or your sort of like capacity for like intellectual engagement. And that things go from like, there's this like cultural curve where things go from being like below the radar and brilliant to like ascending to this like star-like position. And then like once the immediacy sort of gets more distant, then they kind of become a cliche. And I feel like that's a little bit what happened with David Foster Wallace. And like another author that happened to that I really lament is Murakami.
Yeah, very much.
For me, Murakami was like, I think definitely my entryway into like a whole different world of literature. You know, I'd of course I read amazing things, but you know, I didn't really think of literature as like this conversation or this world that I wanted to immerse myself in. Like I read books and I liked them, and that was that. And then I read The Wind-Up Bird Chronicle my sophomore year of college at the behest of a guy I was dating at the time.
Oh, as it so often is.
A stand-up comedian from New Jersey.
Oh.
Who also was a big Infinite Jest fan. So.
Oh my God.
I
regret what I've said already.
Yeah, I mean, there's a laundry list of cliches here.
Yeah,
but,
of course.
But I read it and my mind was blown. Like it was a total entryway for me into literature that, you know, is unconventional and different and you know, I can see how my taste definitely, you know, and I went on to read almost every single Murakami book that he put out. And then, you know, I sort of distanced myself from him a little bit when he sort of, in that, you know, aforementioned cultural curve, became a bit of a cliche. Yeah. And I felt like this strange sense of shame. And then I was like, why? He's actually a really amazing storyteller. Like I value his work, and it was very instrumental in the way I read.
What do you think really gripped you about Murakami? Because I am not so familiar with Murakami. I really only recently stepped into the Murakami waters, and I was pretty astounded. I thought it was superb writing, despite whatever. I mean, it's just, but it's. I'm curious what you found in it at such an early age.
For me, what this is going to sound kind of strange, but I really appreciated the very, very subtle magical realism. You know, it wasn't as overt as like Isabel Allende or Garcia Marquez or you know,
I don't know, like Samantha Schweblin is probably like a more recent author.
Yeah.
But it's this very subtle, he puts you in this world where everything is off by just a millimeter. And he creates, and so much of, so many of the worlds that he create are domestic, which is really interesting to me, especially from like a male. So he creates these worlds that feel very familiar, and he puts you in the routine. You know, and there's a checklist for all Murakami novels, and I love it. You've got a disaffected male lead, you've got unavailable women, you've got cats, you've got whiskey, and you've got jazz. If you have those 5 things, you've got a Murakami novel.
It's so funny. That might even make a Murakami short story, which I was reading too. the classic one, about the burning, which, or I guess the Bong Joon-ho movie is called Burning, but I forget what the story's name is.
No, I don't think it's a Bong Joon-ho movie. Burning.
Is it not?
No, it's not.
Okay.
It's
Mick,
it's a
cut
Korean.
that. Mick, edit that out.
But he's not I mean, with everyone's crush, and it's Steven Yeun.
It's Steven Yeun.
Yeah, he's the lead in Burning. But yeah, so what I appreciated was just the way Murakami infused the everyday with this really like subtle magic, and sometimes a way more explicit magic, like sometimes a way more in your face kind of magic, and it wasn't always like, you know, this like happy festive sort of magical realism. You know, sometimes it could be really sad, and then sometimes it could be really lamenting, and sometimes it could just be straight up bizarre.
Right.
And yeah, there was something about it. The one that really moved me was Hard Boiled Wonderland and the End of the World. And it's like very literally about like going into the recesses of the mind. And yeah, you know, and there's an extensive storyline with like unicorn skulls and
that's so strange. He brings some sort of eclectic magic to the front that seems like, you know, a way of like interpreting the world. It's like a whole viewpoint, which is, I think what's maybe interesting about these really formative writers. There's like, and David Foster Wallace is the same way, like especially Infinite Jest is like it has such an opinion, it has such a viewpoint about the world it's creating. And I think at that time, because, you know, it was your sophomore year, it was my sophomore year too, that we were both like maybe looking for that kind of guidance or that kind of way of seeing. Yeah,
I think so. And my sophomore year of college, I also took one of my first writing courses, which was in a very, you know, typical liberal arts fashion, a writing course in fairy tales, where we read and wrote our own fairy tales. And I've always sort of had a tendency to like, you know, very whimsical, magical things, even if they're incredibly dark. Which, if I don't know what's more whimsical and dark than like the Brothers Grimm or Anderson. It's like, but yeah. So I mean, I think, you know, that's probably no accident that I gravitated towards Murakami at the same time.
Yeah.
That I, you know, was sort of developing myself as a reader.
Yeah. And sort of starting to engage with literature in a different way.
Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, and before that, I read a lot of YA, a fair amount of YA.
Yeah.
One of the most formative series for me ever was this British series, the first by Louise Renison. The first book was called Angus Thongs and Full Frontal Snogging.
I've never heard of this book.
It is phenomenal. It is a young adult series. I've always described it as Bridget Jones's diary for like 14-year-olds. The lead character is named Georgia, and she goes to this private school, and she has friends, and it's just like the most like quintessentially British humor. And I thought it was the height of comedy when I was like 13 or like 12, 13, 14. Like I thought it was just the funniest thing I'd ever read.
Did it make those Harry Potter characters seem like just absolute like bores? Like, was that your comparison point, or were you just kind of like wow, this just feels like a next level of comedy or interest?
No, as a preteen and teen that had like a very predictable like Anglophile viewpoint because of Harry Potter,
Yeah.
I wasn't disappointed by other English things. I was just like actually like way more into them because of that.
Right.
So yeah, so that was super formative. And it's really weird, like the things you gravitate towards, like yourself, and the things that you're assigned to read. Catcher in the Rye, I Know Why the Cage Bird Sings. All those things that you kind of take for granted, but end up being a lot more formative than you might really think. I mean, I still don't like Catcher in the Rye. I still love I Know Why the Cage Bird Sings.
Right.
But yeah, I don't know. There's not exactly like one turning point at which I became a reader or writer. And it's like, I think who I am as a reader is still completely evolving.
Absolutely.
I went through a phase where I was reading solely like nonfiction. I was reading like Maggie Wilson, Melissa Phoebos, Joan Didion, Alexander Chee. I was reading, Durga Chubo. I was like only reading like new, with the exception of like Joan Didion, maybe like pretty recent, like nonfiction. Was just obsessed with like memoirs by like queer women. And then I kind of did a hard about phase and got really obsessed with fiction again. So I don't know. My reading taste definitely goes and comes in ways.
For sure. That's one of the best parts about a bookstore like Skylight Books, and just a lucky perch we get as booksellers is that we get to, whenever we get to go to work at a bookstore, we get to go shopping as well. And like get to develop these like, I mean, this is what I do, is like I sort of like plan out the person I'm going to become in the next year, like via the books I plan on reading throughout the store.
I love that.
I'm like, okay, I'm reading that biography of Frederick Douglass. Then I'm going to go over to like, and read like this science book about quantum mechanics. And then like, I'm going to read up on angels because we have a book on angels now.
Why wouldn't
like, why not? And, that's sort of, that to me, that has become the real fun of reading in later life, is just like really realizing the scope of what's in front of you. And, this sense that you can get absolutely lost in it in a really good way. You can get lost in your reading and what you set out in front of you. I think that's an experience that's maybe a little bit hard to find in the world these days, but you certainly can do it with books when you have them all in front of you.
Yeah, I feel like, I don't know, it might sound kind of corny, but there are very few things that I lose myself in, or that I feel just like so overwhelmingly compelled to. As books. It's like I wish there was something, a lot of people have the capacity to like lose themselves in like so many things, and for me it's just do you ever sort of feel that overwhelming sense that you're just behind when it comes to reading?
So I absolutely, all the time, and sometimes it makes me feel very, very anxious. And sometimes when I think, but that's a little bit when I'm comparing myself to say others, or I'm like, man, I'm not at the level I should be at, or like I haven't read these books, and it's like, wow, I would be a better thinker if I had read those books. I would be a better writer if I'd read those books.
Yeah.
But I do, like I was saying, I do think that there is another side of that, which is to say that reading is so entirely inexhaustible, no matter how dedicated you are.
Mm-hmm.
Like you cannot read everything. It is impossible. That it can be liberating in a sense, because then there's no finish line to it. You just meander through it. You create the path you want to create within like an infinite scope. You can't get to the end. There is no end, I guess.
For me, that's a little bit where the difficulty comes in, is because at a certain point, it becomes a decision of where you're going to allocate your attention.
Yeah.
Because, and a thing that I feel like I get caught up in specifically as a bookseller is this pull. I mean, and this is like a pretty, gross simplification, but like the pull between the old and the new. It's like you have new titles coming out constantly and smaller presses, and There's just so many, there are just so many new titles to learn about, which is so exciting. You know, new books come out every Tuesday, and every Tuesday there's a new hardcover or a new book that wasn't hardcover paperback. And then there's the part of me that's like, oh, you haven't read Moby Dick yet. You haven't read War and Peace. You haven't read I don't know.
But that's, I mean, I know that there's like the canon, the pressure of the canon is like for very real, because we're taught at a very young age, when, especially in colleges, that like, these are the books, like this is what literature is. It is these things. And it feels like there is, in some sense, you're never going to be able to understand literature unless you read those books, even though we've done plenty to poo-poo that idea, rightly so. It's dumb.
Yeah.
But it still is this lingering thing because of the way we're taught.
Yeah. And I think what's, kind of reassuring is, what is fed to us as canon, like, in college and high school and thereafter, like working in bookstores or not, is really dictated by this like very like white cultural point of view, and it's like there are like the quintessential like authors of color that are allowed to be part of the canon.
For sure.
And like what's really cool, like you have like your Toni Morrison, you have your Langston Hughes, which are like, I mean, brilliant beyond brilliant. Like, how I feel about Toni Morrison. And what's encouraging and what's really encouraging about being a bookseller is getting to see like what kind of feels like the formation of like a new canon, or maybe just destruction of canon entirely. That is just so much more open and so much more predicated on valuing non-white perspectives.
Totally.
And like non-white, non-heteropatriarchal perspective.
Yeah. I mean, look, I think that's totally right. And what that does is maybe make the canon so encompassing and so inclusive that it can't hold as like this like one unitary structure, right? There's like this thing called the canon, which has like 30 books. Like maybe that opening of the arms of it explodes it and destroys it, but that's for the better. And if, in the end, we all end up creating our own canons, it's like, that's fine.
Yeah.
We ought to do that. We ought to feel like our reading experiences are as vital and as legitimate as anybody else's.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that. And, that's not to say that everything that is, considered like the height of literature should be ignored, because I'm definitely not saying that.
No.
And there's so much of it that I still have yet to read. Like there's so much that I still have yet to read.
Of course.
And it's like the blessing and a curse of being a bookseller is like, it's the best problem to have, of being like, wow, there is so much more that I'm excited to discover.
You haven't even read Dune yet. I mean,
don't put me on blast.
Well, there's a movie coming out soon. You can just.
Oh, T. Chalamet. Yeah.
T. Chalamet. I wanted to ask you, we can maybe go through this quickly or not. What are your top reads in the past year or super recently? Or just like, what have you been doing? What's your reading?
What have I been doing? I've been pretty hard back into fiction. I have not done a lot of nonfiction lately. I'm trying to, I just read Beloved by Toni Morrison. And I don't think I've ever been so emotionally gutted by
that book. I'll never forget reading that book. That was an early book for me when I was just like, it's like, okay, yeah, maybe I was like, oh, I could, it'd be cool to see, like, to do what, David Foster Wallace did for me in my brain. And then you read Beloved and you're like, holy shit, what have I just read? What is this thing that just happened? Like there's such a force to that book that is unmatched in anything I've ever read, I think.
Yeah, and it's so funny because I didn't read my first Toni Morrison book until last year.
which is, I'm a little embarrassed to say it, but like whatever, we all come to things when we come to them. And
Of course.
I started reading Toni Morrison last year, and I did not realize how much like she informed like all the stylistic wordplay and formatting wordplay that like seems so fresh and like revolutionary and a lot of work today. Like Toni Morrison was doing that.
Oh, and better than anybody.
Yeah. And I didn't realize it. And it's just jaw dropping. Like it almost, it almost brings tears to my eyes to just like think about her. And, and the scary thing is my takeaway from Beloved, I mean, not my only one, but I had a lot of takeaways, but one of them was, I never realized how much my mother loves me until I read it. I never realized how much your parents love you.
Yeah.
And then I read that book and I was like, oh my God, like, love is demonic and amazing and beautiful and destructive, and also the life it's just.
I know it is that is what it is. Toni Morrison's always dealing with in what I've read of her, it seems like she's always sort of dealing with this double edge of beautiful things. Like beautiful things like love are like, they're both obviously this gorgeous positive, but they're also demonic. They make you do, and they compel you to do heinous things sometimes, which is Beloved's full of heinous acts. But at the end, it's a stunning testament to love as well. And to sort of the beauty of, I guess, of a parent relationship. So it's like, it makes you sort of like, it makes you tremble a little bit thinking about the consequences of that idea. Anything you might think of that is beautiful is also like incredibly violent.
Yeah. And I mean, it's also just like the most stunning and comprehensive indictment of slavery I think I've ever read.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that book, I think after you read that book, you can't imagine that slavery was a reality. And
no,
because I have this bad tendency of, after reading something, is I immediately want to know everyone's opinion. So I, of course, Googled Beloved reviews, and there was a review calling it like the great horror novel of Black literature.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, of course it's horror, of course it's a horror story.
Yeah.
Like, you think it's like this, it is of course like this great profound piece of literature, but it's also classic horror,
Classic.
And that didn't occur to me. And it was really exciting to like make that connection that someone else made for me. But
well, it's interesting because we call a lot of like genre now has this place in literature that it didn't, that we say, oh wow, genre all of a sudden is like back in literature or something. But then you see, Beloved, Toni Morrison writes this book, I think it comes out in 93, 92, 93.
Yeah.
And it's totally a genre piece. There are ghosts like haunting this house. It's a ghost story.
Yeah.
But it's, in that sense, it's just like she was just so ahead. She was just so ahead and so free. And her freedom brought her to some of the most brutal places. I mean, as you say, her depiction of slavery is, the most shocking, brutal indictment you could imagine.
Yeah, definitely. So aside from Beloved, some major standouts from the past year or so, The Mars Room by Rachel Kushner was definitely one that I was just floored.
Yeah.
Just amazingly done. And The Book of X by Sarah Rose Editor.
Yeah.
Just stunning. It's a book in which there's something called a meat quarry, and you go and you harvest meat from caves made of meat, and
Great.
It's just one of the most
love that.
It's
meat
just
quarry.
It's just one of the most amazing depictions of what it's like to live in a body that you feel like you have no control over.
Yeah.
And, you know, like how much your body can really be a prison when it doesn't look the way that society thinks it should, you know, which sounds like a very like kind of like blanket body positivity bullshit kind of phrase.
Yeah.
I mean, it's really true. It's like we all live in bodies, and I think, I don't know for certain, but I think that everyone to a certain extent has felt uncomfortable in their own body at some point or the other. And this book just really drives home that reality in such a beautiful, tender, like heartbreaking way. And that's a $2 radio book. Excellent small press.
Yeah, very good small press. I love, there's a great book up there. It's called boy, I just had it. I forgot it.
Oh no.
Wait, hang on. I have it behind me somewhere. White Dialogues, book by Bennett Sims, the short story collection.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I've seen that in the store for sure.
Yeah. It's a good short story collection, genre E for sure. Yeah. So I mean, my books the past year, I've been running the Coyotes book club, so we've read some really, really good books. Probably the best ones that we read, honestly, Sula, Giovanni's Room, which I had not gotten into much James Baldwin, and I'm convinced he's just the best, like pound for pound, like the best writer.
That
period.
book destroyed me emotionally.
Destroyed me.
We read it at the same time, and I didn't know that that's what James Baldwin did. It was the first James Baldwin that I'd ever read, and I was also similarly emotionally affected by that book.
It was just like, I didn't know that English could feel that way. Like language could feel that way. It's such a perfectly written book, and I mean, gut-wrenching for everybody. It is a true tragedy, that book.
Oh my God, I know. It's like so weird the way that like Giovanni just becomes like, I feel when I walked away from that book, I felt less like Giovanni was a character more than he was like this locus for like everyone else's desire. Like he was like this vessel that was like filled with everyone else's desire, and he ended up where he did. No spoilers. Because he didn't get to dictate his own path. Everything was dictated for him by you know, being in the crosshairs of everyone's desire. And I thought that was just like astounding.
Yeah, it's astounding because there is nothing that it refuses to come to easy definitions about who Giovanni is.
Yeah.
And everybody in the book is very, very confused in this most incredible, natural seeming way, just a way that is just true, that people don't know who they love. They don't know quite how they love. And especially at this time when it's literally like, if you are gay, you are either like, you know, it takes place in the 1950s in Paris. You're sort of like either this, you know, I don't know, you have to live on like the edges of society, or you're just this like sort of, I guess, fetishized thing. And it's like Giovanni gets caught in the middle of that. He's both like being rejected from society, even while he's being like clawed at, and he becomes everybody's sort of revelation about themselves, like the means for them to like be who they are, including for the main character David, who ends up being, I think that's his name, David, who ends up just abandoning him in the most despicable. I mean, it is god awful, but I mean, an amazing book.
Yeah, I think one of the books that came really close to that for me, like this could fall easily under the, you know, formative titles and top reads, is Top of the D'Urbervilles.
Oh yes, you were telling me that you read this recently, right? And you loved it.
I've never read any Thomas Hardy
And I picked this up kind of on a whim, and I just like, I was so blown away. Like, I was so blown away that something so far removed from my own reality could be so,
Yeah.
could have such an impact. I mean, I know that sounds not very thoughtful. I mean, obviously people are impacted greatly by stuff
Yeah,
from a really
but
long time.
it's funny how experience, you, in certain novels, you realize that experience is much more of a continuum than you think.
Yeah, and so, I mean, this is, I think, one of the few books where I got so invested that, you know, at certain parts I would like literally throw it physically across the room because I didn't want to keep reading it. And
Wow.
I just, there's this line in it, and it's like, "Thy damnation slumbereth not."
Oh, I like
And yeah, it's just, it's heartbreaking, and it's beautiful, and it's tragic. It's like a worse star-crossed lovers type thing, because it's a woman who's not only in this sort of star-crossed relationship, but she's also kind of similar to Giovanni, just completely abandoned
Yeah.
because she is deemed unfit by the rules of society at the time she's existing. And she doesn't even really have a hand in her own destruction. She's really just a victim of so many forces that are out of her control, a lot,
Yeah.
you know, like Giovanni. And it's just a feat of writing, and also a feat of, you know, world building. And, you know, because Hardy builds this like fictitious English countryside, and it's beautiful. It's like so evocative, so luscious, so rural. You just like want to be like in a glen with some sheep while you're reading it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Love a Glen.
Yeah. It's stunning. Yeah. I think I highly recommend it to everybody.
Yeah. I mean, that book comes out 20 years before, say, House of Mirth, right? Which is working in like a similar territory.
Yeah. Very similar.
Yeah. Which is funny. Just to bring it all back, to circle back to one of the first books we talked about.
Yeah.
Yeah. Another book I read quickly, Last Samurai. Everybody, you should read it. I loved
It's a very
it.
divisive book.
Yeah. Yes. It's Vulture's top book of the millennium.
Ooh.
Which is interesting.
Did they just forget that Zadie Smith exists?
Well, what's Zadie Smith? Which book?
What do you mean? On Beauty.
Oh, I haven't read that.
Oh man.
Okay.
That's also one of my top reads of the past year.
Okay, I'll read that. I'll put that on the list, because I do love White Teeth, even though I understand it has problems, but I love that book. I feel like we've been talking for
a really long time.
I think we definitely have been talking for longer than we were supposed to be talking.
Yeah, we've definitely been talking for like an hour.
An hour, yeah, for sure.
Is this even gonna all make it?
Oh, I don't think so.
Oh my god.
I don't think so.
We were supposed to give like 15 minutes, right?
I know. Well, whatever.
Oops.
Mick, you got some homework, pal.
Sorry, Mick. Too bad.
Sorry, Mick.
I guess that wraps up our convo on life, love during a global pandemic. I guess that's redundant. I guess a pandemic is global already.
We're careful with words.
Yeah, but thank you for listening. Please continue to support Skylight if you are able to. We're doing online orders. You can buy gift cards. There are a multitude of ways to support us. Just check out our website and our social media. And if you're able to do any of those things, we would greatly appreciate it, so that we can continue to bring you quality content such as this.
Awesome podcasts and book discussion and tales from the books, from the Handsell.
Tales from the Black Lagoon of books.
That's right.
Anyway.
Yes, correct.
Thank you. Thank you. God bless you. Wash your hands. Okay.
Yeah.
Don't go
Wash
out.
your-
Don't. Your civil liberties are not being threatened by staying in your apartment. Just stay.
Stay inside. Read a good book.
We just
And-
talked about so many. Just choose
Yeah.
one of the ones we talked about.
Literally choose one of them. Buy them at skylightbooks.com. Read one of those books and have a great time staying inside.
Yeah. And if you have thoughts, questions, comments, concerns, are just responding in abject horror to everything we talked about, send an email to info@skylightbooks.com.
All right.
All right. Thank you
for
guys.
listening.
Bye. We did it.
We did it.
Thank you for listening to the Skylight Books podcast series. Please don't forget to visit our website at skylightbooks.com and make sure to follow us on Twitter and Instagram. Also, don't forget to subscribe to this podcast for more author talks and bookseller conversations. You can find us on Podbean, iTunes, and Spotify. Stay safe and healthy, and we hope to see you back in our store soon.